Thank you to our young people who I think have the concept of truth down. Well, I read a story not too long ago about a congregation that was celebrating its golden anniversary. And so they'd been serving their community for 50 years. And as part of their celebration, members of the church decided to get T-shirts with a slogan that said, 50 years of unity. And they began to talk about whether the T-shirt should be 50% polyester, 50% cotton, or whether they should be 100% cotton. The poly cotton group thought it was important to have a blend that would last longer. The 100% cotton group thought it was important to have all natural fabrics. And so these two groups argued for weeks and weeks. And finally, they were so angry at each other, they couldn't agree that rather than working it out, the church split, and the two groups held separate 50th anniversary celebrations with two kinds of T-shirts, all emblazoned with the words, 50 years of unity. Now, yes, this story is more than a little silly, but it illustrates a tragic reality. We sometimes get so entrenched in a particular issue or ideology or cause that we allow our anger to consume us. We act in ways that are in opposition to the way of life that Jesus prescribes for his followers. And all you have to do is spend a few minutes on social media, and you know this to be true. In this morning's gospel, which is actually a continuation of Jesus' teachings from his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus addresses the issues of how we are to relate to one another. And he warned his disciples that they'd be held accountable for their anger against one another. And he also addresses the sin of murder, the sin of adultery, and the sin of dishonesty. I don't know about you, when I first read this passage and thought I had to preach on, I thought, oh no, not this one. Because these are extremely challenging. But if we dig just a little deeper into this text, I believe there is grace and good news to be found in Jesus' invitation. You see, Jesus presents 3 of the commandments and offers commentary on them. You shall not murder, cheat on your spouse, or lie. In the ancient words, the law was given to Moses to guide the Jewish people in their walk with God. They were meant to be words of life. And Jesus reminds us of this as he gives them new meaning. Now, no one who lived back in the day would acknowledge having broken any of these commandments. Jesus undoubtedly knew. He also knows something else. He knew the content of the hearts of his listeners, and so he goes beyond the rules and the law, and he challenges those who first heard these words and those of us that call ourselves Christ followers this day. In Matthew's gospel, Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment.'" Now that seems pretty much like a no-brainer. We shouldn't be killing one another. But then he goes on, and here's the hard part. "But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you'll be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council." Those are the elders of the church. "And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire." Now, I would guess that no one here present has committed murder. But which one of us at one time or another has not been really angry with a family member or their spouse or their parents, children, or a co-worker, or a warden or vestry member, or even the clergy? I know there is at least one person here who has been really angry. I'm guilty. I've been angry, really angry. Sometimes justifiably, that's righteous anger. Sometimes not so much. I suspect the same is true for you. And so Jesus brilliantly extends the reach of the commandment beyond the act of murder to the thoughts, feelings, and actions that cause people to commit these crimes. And he challenges us to deal with the problem of sin while it still resides within our thoughts and feelings in our hearts before it finds expression in the work of our hands, the words of our mouths, or even as text on a phone screen. He calls us to reconcile with one another so that good feelings, those feelings of forgiveness and mercy, godly feelings, will overcome those evil feelings of our hearts. And once our hearts are right, we'll no longer be tempted to act out in more destructive ways, because instead we'll be motivated by love, which is our proper response to our neighbor, and even to our enemies, as Jesus reminds us. And so he challenges folks to move beyond the letter of the law to the emotional source that would cause us to commit murder, adultery, or lying. He wants us to deal with these emotions, to nip them in the bud. Think about it. Anger, jealousy, and lust. Those are the root causes of so many things that can lead to murder, divorce, broken relationships. As I said, I'm not talking about righteous anger, but destructive anger that actually seeks to hurt and to destroy. Jealousy and lust, they are what often lead to adultery and fabricating lies to justify bad behavior. So this morning, Jesus is telling us, look into our hearts and to deal with your feelings. Then with God's help, recalibrate, seek and give forgiveness, and derail those emotions that lead us into temptation. Temptation to destroy another person, temptation to destroy a relationship. Now, with regards to anger, he does give us some practical advice. He says that if while standing before the altar with your sacrifice, you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, you should leave your gift at the altar, find your brother and sister, and work out your differences. And then come back and make your offering. You know, an earlier edition of the prayer book actually says you should not receive communion if you're holding anger in your heart towards another. Jesus was telling his listeners try to get things right with those that they cared about before they could come into right relationship with God. Theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer says this about anger: the angry word is a blow struck at another, a stab at their heart. It seeks to hit, to hurt, and to destroy. A deliberate insult is worse, for we openly disgrace someone in the eyes of the world, causing others to despise them. And our anger hurts us as well. In the words of that famous theologian and advice columnist who has now gone on to be with the saints, Ann Landers, she says, hate is like acid. It can damage the vessel in which it is stored, as well as destroy the object on which it is poured. Anger, like acid, burns, and burns like an ulcer at the core of our being. Friends, Jesus offers us an antidote to anger. Get right with one another. Loosen the grip that anger has on you, and instead find ways to forgive and to make peace. And I believe that is why the sacrament of reconciliation is such a gift to all of us as a means towards forgiveness if we're holding on to anger. I encourage you to contact me or Reverend Stephen to talk about reconciliation. And it isn't necessarily a once and done. Reconciliation can be a process. There are always consequences to the hurt that has been caused to us or we have caused to others. but we don't have to let that hurt and anger destroy us. Friends, Jesus challenges us to live as God's people. And through reconciliation, forgiveness, love of others, whoever that other might be, we can go beyond the law, beyond the rules, and touch holiness, heal this broken world. So this morning, as we prepare to bring our offerings to God, to come to be nourished and sustained at God's table, I invite you to take a few moments before we renew our baptismal promises to rise to a higher place. Think about anyone in your life that is causing you to be angry, and ask God's help to forgive and mend, if possible, that which is broken. Find the essence of God's Spirit, because it resides within each one of us. Poet Emily Dickinson wrote, "One never realizes the heights they have attained until they are asked to rise higher." That is the good news and invitation of our gospel this morning. Rise higher. Jesus is asking all of us to rise higher.